That's great. I'm very impressed. Let's move this table back away that way. Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you. All right. Good morning, Ms. McGrath.
Good morning.
Hannah. Rachel. O'Connor. Today is Monday, 27th of March. Wow. Is that right? No, it's the wrong date. That's February. That's February's date. Today's what, the 14th?
13th, sorry. 13th, 1-3.
13?
Yes, of March.
Today's the 13th of March. March.
Yeah.
You know what day the Jews left Egypt? In the English calendar?
No.
March 4th. That's a joke. Good morning, Hannah.
Good morning.
No, what's that? Sorry? Empty.
Rachel and Hannah. And Hannah McGuire. And Leah Ferdman, right? You're near the top. You're number 3. And Hannah? Getting there, keep coming. Then I won't have to guess. Okay. Sharon, right? Yes. This is Mommy. Gar, Mommy Gar, right?
Robin Gar, yes.
Robbie?
Robin.
Robin.
R-B-Y-N.
Okay. Well, I wrote you down as Mommy. Okay, and Ronnie Rosenberg. Rosenbaum. Ronnie Rosenbaum. And Rachel Hannah. Tahir. That's it. 3, 5, 8. Okay. We are just getting our feet wet in chapter 10, spiritually speaking, not to be confused with getting our feet wet outside. Oh, Hashem, it's not raining hard. It can rain very hard in Brooklyn. It can rain very, very hard. It can be like torrential rain. But it's not, we haven't had any yet so far. This is just light rain. I had to set a bracha downstairs before I came up. So we want to talk about the person who's a tzaddik, a perfect tzaddik. And we saw that it says in the Zohar, who wrote the Zohar? Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. Gianna is here. Bo Hashem. Michelson.
Yes.
So Rabbi Shimon says that he went very high up in heaven and he saw the great chamber where the tzaddikim were. The great chamber where the great tzaddikim are, the highest tzaddikim, like Moshe Rabbeinu said, there are not too many there. Not too many. In chapter 1 of the Tanya, we confronted this, and it said there, that's why it says that the tzaddik is the foundation of the world. The whole world stands on the shoulders of the tzaddik. not to be confused with Greek mythology. They have a different idea of the world standing on the shoulders, but not of a righteous person, just a very strong one. But the whole world stands in the merit of the righteous person. Because he is so righteous, it protects the whole world. If Hashem should decide to punish the world or to destroy the world, the righteousness of the tzaddik doesn't allow it to happen. Can't do it. It's too holy. What can I compare this to? It says that, I think it was Rabbi Yehuda Hanossi, the prince, if a bird would fly over where he was learning Torah, the bird would plop. Just with too much spiritual energy for it, it couldn't stand. Or Bilam, the evil prophet who tried to curse the Jews, when Hashem visited him, and this is amazing, when a person, a prophet speaks prophecy, so the Rambam explains that he's totally out of himself physically, and Hashem speaks through his body. That's the prophecy. And for this, a person has to be extremely pure, extremely pure, with not a smidgen of unholiness in him, for God to speak through him like that. And so but Hashem wanted that the non-Jewish people should have prophets, that they shouldn't be able to complain and say, if you had given us prophets, we would have been better. They would have taught us and encouraged us and scolded us if we were bad. So therefore Hashem gave them certain prophets. One of them, most outstanding, is written about in the Torah at length. His name is Bilam. He was a descendant of our great-grandfather, the father-in-law of Yaakov. And he was given powers of prophecy, and he used them to curse the Jews instead of using them for holiness. He was hired by Balak when Balak, the king of Moab, saw the Jews are coming up out of Egypt, millions of them, they're going to overrun his country. He was very frightened. He knew that their power was in the mouth, that they prayed to Hashem and Hashem would save them. So he's going to fight them fire with fire. He hired someone whose power was in his mouth, a prophet, Bilam, to come and curse them. And Bilam had a good track record. When he cursed people, they were cursed. And on the highest levels. And we see this even now. Hitler, Yamach Shemoy, also had his magicians and his wise men to curse and to bless the people he wanted and the people he wanted to harm. This is something that kings do and kings have done, to have holy people around them to invoke powers, high powers, to achieve their ends, their wicked ends, or sometimes you read about benevolent kings who follow the advice of the sages. Alexander the Great was one of them. Shirel snuck in.
How are you?
Now I have to find where your name is, because it's listed not alphabetical. Wait, oh, there it is, the top. Cohen Saban. Okay. Anybody else came in when I? Oh, Batya.
Good morning, Rabbi.
Good morning, Batya. Welcome to the summertime.
Yes.
There's summertime on the clock.
Oh, that's why. I know that's
Yagdano.
Yeah, that's true. But it changed Saturday.
Yeah, no,
But still, yeah, it's,
yeah.
So when Hashem came to Bilam and appeared before him, when Hashem appeared before Bilam, since he was not pure on the inside, he was very evil on the inside. The Torah is very explicit about it, it even tells us that he was sodomizing his donkey regularly. Well, when Hashem appeared to him, he fell down. He could not stand. because this level of tzaddik is so totally pure, the complete tzaddik is so totally pure, that there's very few of them. That's what Rabbi Shimon says in the Zohar. So what about a tzaddik, a person who is a tzaddik? That is to say, his whole life is righteousness. He's learning Torah the whole time. He's davening. Soleh.
How are you?
I am, Baruch Hashem. Very glad to be here. I'm glad that you are all here.
Thank you.
This is a wonderful class. I think this is the best class in history. Chaya Atkins came in quietly. Didn't call your name until now. Can't say that again. What happens if a person is almost a perfect tzaddik? Just not quite. It's just a little bit of dust. Wasn't purified yet. Can you imagine such a thing? He's davening, he's learning, he's teaching, he's helping, he's good, he's humble, he's kind, he's generous, he's sweet, he's wonderful. He loves everybody and everybody loves him. Just not perfect. Like they used to have an ad for Maxwell House coffee. Good to the very last drop. Ping. You remember that? So this is a tzaddik. He can't say he's a perfect tzaddik because he's not, to the very last drop, he's not a tzaddik. Wow, what an exalted level this is that we're talking about, okay? We're not just talking about your average guy on the street. You may see him like an average guy on the street, but you wouldn't know what's really cooking inside. Some people look very righteous and inside they're not so righteous at all. Okay, so now when a person, we're talking now about a Beinoni. Can a Beinoni be a tzaddik like this? Alter Rebbe is telling us, yes. It's possible and permission is given for every person to be a Beinoni and for some people even to be righteous. Now, is this something that's preordained or is it something you just work for? And I think the answer is that it's preordained. Because you both, because even if it's preordained, you have to work for it. It doesn't come just like that. However, it says on the first page of the Tanya, in the name of Job, Eov, right? Famous non-Jewish righteous person who suffered for 70 years, terrible suffering. But he says, Rabbeinu Shalom, master of the world, you created tzaddikim and you created wicked people, but you didn't designate who is who. So no person can say, well, I'm created this way, so I'm not responsible for if I do bad things because Hashem made me like this. Can't say that because Eov says, you didn't say who's who, but we know the truth. Hashem knows who is who. And when it says you created righteous people, tzaddikim, that means you created neshamas that are capable of being totally righteous, like Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, like Moshe Rabbeinu, like Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, like Rashi, the great tzaddikim throughout the ages. The great, outstanding tzaddikim. So that's what Rabbi Shimon says in the Zohar. I saw them, but they're very few. So what if a person is like this, that Hashem has designated him to be a tzaddik, and he's working on it, and he's almost there. There's just a little bit of dust that's hasn't been purified yet in his character. What is he? So this is what we're going to say is the tzaddik v'ra'loi. So we thought in chapter 1, when we saw there is such a category as tzaddik v'ra'loi, a tzaddik who has bad, ra is bad. He has a bad life. It's a tzaddik who has a bad life. What does that mean? So some people say that's a term from the Talmud. Okay, it's Talmudism in the first tractate of the Talmud called Blessings. You would think that he's a righteous person who suffers. He doesn't have money, he's ill, he doesn't have satisfaction. His children, he has a lot of anxiety and spiritual suffering from his children who don't seem to go in the ways that he wants them to go, or else they themselves are suffering, and nothing hurts a parent more than to see the physical suffering of a child. Well, that's one answer. Tzaddik who has it's a bad life. But then we have all kinds of stories, like Reb Zusha of Anipol, who wrote the introduction, the word approbation. I dare say none of you know what the word approbation means. I don't know what the word approbation means. I think it means approval.
Aprobación.
He wrote the approbation to the Tanya that says, he says, good book to read. You could read it. I recommend it. Now, one of the Hasidim of the Alter Rebbe asked the Alter Rebbe, how do we understand what it says that a person has to bless Hashem for the bad? Yeah, you have to bless Hashem for everything you enjoy. You have a cup of coffee, you have to say, thank you, Hashem. In the tractate of the Talmud about blessings, it says we have to bless Hashem for every good thing that we have. So before everything, we have to say a blessing. And then they said, well, what about bad things? Yeah, you have to say a blessing on bad things too, because there's nothing really, really bad from heaven. There's where the good is not visible. If the good isn't visible, you say it's bad. But then you find out later that it was good. Like the Rebbe, for instance, was stuck in Nazi occupied France. He couldn't get out. He managed to buy 2 tickets for himself and his wife, the Rebbetzin. And at the last minute, he got a telegram from his father-in-law, don't take that boat. That meant he's not going to get out of Europe. The Rebbetzin sister, Rebbetzin Shana, did not get out of Europe. She was killed. So that looked like a bad thing, but no bad comes from the Rebbe. So they didn't take that boat. They managed to get on the next boat, but that boat was sunk. So somebody said to the Rebbe, if you knew the boat was going to sink, why didn't you let everybody know? He says, I didn't know the boat was going to sink. I just knew that my son-in-law shouldn't come on that boat. That was my feeling. That was my thought. As a Rebbe, I listen to my thoughts. Why do I listen to my thoughts? Now I'm going to digress. Listen to this, girls. When the previous Rebbe now had to get out of Europe, he was in Riga. Where's Riga? In Latvia.
Where?
Riga.
Riga.
What?
The capital of
Latvia. Maybe it's pronounced.
And the Germans were coming. And the Latvians and the Lithuanians were very anti-Semitic. They were worse than the Germans. When they were given a free hand, when the Germans took over, occupied the country, and they were given a free hand, they killed a lot of Jewish people with great pleasure. They all gathered around to watch, like the Romans in the Colosseum, watched people fight to the death. Anyway, he had to leave, he had to get out, and they had this plan that this is how they're going to go. They had it worked out. This is how they're going to go, but it was risky. The Rebbe's son-in-law, Rabbi Gorari, these are our relation to all the Goraris here in Crown Heights. He came up with a better plan, much better plan. And he told his father-in-law, the Rebbe, we could do it this other way, and it's much safer way to do it, much more secure. And the previous Rebbe said, no way. we stick with the first idea. And they said, but Rebbe, I said, no, we stick with the first idea because that was my first idea. I have to go by my first idea. When somebody came to, there's a story about the Rebbe Maharash, Rebbe Shmuel, fourth Rebbe of Lubavitch, youngest son of the Tzemach Tzedek. Tzemach Tzedek is third Rebbe of Lubavitch. Here we go. Alter Rebbe, Mitter Rebbe, Tzemach Tzedek. Fourth, youngest son of 7 was the Rebbe Shmuel. Okay. So somebody came to him. They had no money in the house. They were very poor. And somebody came to the Rebbe to ask a blessing, and he gave the Rebbe 1,000 ruble. A huge sum of money. Or maybe it was 300 rubles. A large sum of money, enough to make a wedding. Like today's market. What does it take to make a wedding today? 30, 40, 50, something like that. So the members of the household were happy. They owed everybody money. They owed the butcher money. They owed the fishmonger money. They owed the vegetables, the guy who sold vegetables money. They owed rent for the house. They owed money right, left, and center. Here was money that could pay off all their debts and buy food and clothes and things that they needed. And then a man came in. He has to make a wedding for his daughter, and he doesn't have money for the wedding. And he says, how much you need? Exactly what he just got, 300 rubles. He says, I have for you the money. And he gave him the money. And the children were so upset. He said, Tata, we need that money. We need the money. He said, well, you see, I could have thought, when the guy told me he needed this amount of money, and someone just in front of him had given me the money, or vice versa, maybe it was the other way around. So I thought right away, that's where the money should go. And then I thought to myself, you know what? Why should I just give all the money to him? I could divide it up and give a little here and a little there. And a lot of people would benefit from this money if I divide it up into portions. That would be a better idea. And then I said to myself, that's the Yetzer Hara. I said, Rebbe Maharash said about himself. He said, that's the Yetzer Hara. If that was the truth and the right thing to do, I would have thought of it first. And since I'm coming to think of it afterwards, it's just the Yetzer Hara trying to derail my first thought, which was the right one. So I go by the first thought. When I answer people, the first thing that comes into my head is what I tell them. So I have to apply the same standard to myself. When we have to get out of here to save our lives, I had an idea that this is how we should go, and there was a risk involved. And you, my son-in-law, Rabbi Gorari, you had a better idea that was more secure, but that was my second thought, not my first thought. If I listen to my first thought with other people, I have to listen to my first thought with myself. It's a deep lesson. That's a deep lesson in a lot of things that we can learn from this story. One is trust in Hashem.
But, I mean, the idea to...
You know, like for instance, to give you a scenario, what does this mean? Good morning, Ronit. Give me an example. Let's say a person has to marry off a child, and the shidduch is proposed. A daughter, you have to marry off a daughter, and a very nice young man's name comes up. And the person who suggests it says 100 reasons why it's a good idea. And you can't ask the Rebbe because you can't ask the Rebbe anymore because he's not here to write in. So you open a book of the Igros, and at random, you open to the page and you look at the first line on the page. And the first line on the page says, this is not a good idea. You really shouldn't do it. He's not talking about shidduchim, but that's what it says there on the page. This is not a good idea. So you go back to the shadchan and you say, I'm sorry, I got an answer from the Rebbe, this is not a good idea. And you think, well, maybe it was a good idea. I mean, this was a letter about kashrus or something else, building a mikveh, who knows what, opening a yeshiva. It wasn't about shidduchim. But the Rebbe said on the first line on the top of the page, this is not a good idea. So I said to the shadchan, I don't think this is a good idea. He went back to the other party and then they said, what? You crazy? This is a good idea. And he had 100 reasons why it's a good idea. And they were all good reasons. But the Rebbe said it's not a good idea. This happened to me. So I asked Rabbi Majeski about it. He said, and I often have trouble seeing Rabbi Majeski. Can't find him, can't get to him. He doesn't answer the phone call, he's not available. And I went to a wedding that night and there he was. So I asked him, I told him right away. He says, there always have been cases like this where a person didn't get the answer from the Rebbe that he wanted or he expected. And he asked again and again, didn't get the answer he expected. So he kept on pursuing the subject until he squeezed a reluctant okay out of the Rebbe. But then afterwards he saw that it really was a mistake. The Rebbe knew to try and warn him away from this. So the same thing by the first thought of the Rebbe Maharash, or the first thought concerning the allocation of these monies, or the first thought of the previous Rebbe about how they should leave Europe, or the thought that he had that the Rebbe shouldn't take that boat. And since he had the thought, and he's a pure person, if a thought comes into his head, he pays attention to it. So he told the Rebbe, don't go. He couldn't tell everybody else, don't go on the boat. He didn't know that the boat was going to sink. Just he knew, he felt, his intuition told him that that's not the right thing to do. And then that boat got sunk. Okay, so this is a completely righteous person that if a thought comes into his head, it's a righteous thought. And people like that, girls, don't despair. People like that are very few. So if you're not like that, that's okay. Keep trying to do the right thing. Surround yourself with people who can advise you. That's what the Rebbe said. If you can't write to me and speak to me about a subject, Rebbe said, if I'm not available, what you should do is speak to friends who care about you and who are familiar with the subject. Like if it's a medical subject, speak to a doctor who's a friend of the family or personal friend. If it's about business, speak to a friend who knows business. Logical, right? Or speak to many such people and then go by the majority of opinions. I was told that by the Rebbe's secretary. I said, what does that mean when the Rebbe says, ask your friends? He said, you ask a lot of friends. The Rebbe is empowering your friends to clarify the answer that the Rebbe wants to give you. Okay, we're not exactly learning text in Tanya, but it really is all about this text, we're talking about the tzaddik who's the right, completely righteous tzaddik. And on his way, he has to work his way there. He's born with the potential to become a righteous tzaddik. This is what it says on page 1 of the Tanya. We have to go back to page 1 now, where Eob says, Rabbeinu Shalom, you created righteous people, you created wicked people, but you didn't say who's who. So that means that you created certain neshamas like Rabbi Shimon himself, or Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, or Rashi, or the Rambam, or the Rebbe, with holy souls. They're born with a holy soul, and the potential is there that they can become great holy people, completely righteous people. But a person doesn't know if that's him or not him. So it says also in the first page, no, it says later in the Tanya, page 13, chapter 13, I think, that Rabba is, whose name is on the first page of the Tanya, that says on the first page of the Tanya, Rabba, the angel of death, could not take him because he was constantly saying words of Torah. And because he was constantly saying words of Torah, the angel of death had no power over him and had to trick him by making him fall down a step. Or I'm confused about the story of it. If it's David HaMelech, the same story. the step broke and he fell, or he was distracted by people chopping trees in the garden. Who's chopping trees in my garden? At that split second, the angel of death took him because he wasn't saying words of Torah. But it says about him, his mouth did not stop saying words of Torah. And the Alter Rebbe says about him, because he really considered himself to be a Beinoni. And if he had stopped saying words of Torah, he wouldn't be a tzaddik. He was a Beinoni saying Torah the whole time. So a Beinoni is like a tzaddik. So he said, I'm a Beinoni, I'm like a tzaddik. I'm not really a tzaddik. That's how he felt. So we're talking about such a person that he's working like Rabbah, constantly saying words of Torah, trying to achieve the level that is his potential to achieve it. And that's what it says, top of page 151, bottom of page 150. When a person works so hard spiritually that his godly soul is winning, he's winning the war with his Yetzer Hara, overcoming his animal soul, he's knocking it out of the ballpark, and he banishes and eradicates its evil from within him, from the left side of his heart, because the Yetzer Hara is in the left side of the heart. And he totally chases the Yetzer Hara out of the left side of his heart, because there's such an excess of light and life overflowing, gushing over from the right side of the heart into the left side of the heart. And we learned also in the last chapter, no, it's in chapter 12, a little bit of light pushes away a lot of darkness. Come into a totally dark room, you light a match, you see what's going on. A little light pushes away a lot of darkness. When the previous Rebbe was a little boy, he was thrown into a prison. It was totally dark, and there was someone groaning in the corner, and he was very frightened. Oh, heard this groaning noise. Oh my gosh. And he didn't know what to do, so he began reciting chapters of Mishnah by heart. For 1 hour, he could recite the whole order of Mishnah, which is huge. In 1 hour, he could say it so fast, because he knew it was so brilliant, even as a child. When he finished saying an hour of Mishnayos, finished the whole order of the 6 orders of Mishnah, he finished the first of them. He remembered he had matches in his pocket. Kids have matches. He was a kid, he had matches. He lit a match, he saw there was a calf, a little calf tied up, lying on the ground in the prison cell. That was a whole story. Anyway, but a little light pushed away all the darkness. So here the light in the right side of the heart of this righteous person is overflowing, and the left side of the heart is full of light and holiness. So the Yetzer Hara has nowhere to be, cannot be there. So, and this is what it says, he banishes the evil from his heart. That's what it means. That's what it's referring to. There's a pasuk about it. You should banish the evil from within you. What is that referring to? It's referring to a city that does idol worship in Israel. When the Jewish people are living in Israel under Torah law, and people start worshiping idols, so that's illegal al pi Torah. It's a death penalty. You're not allowed to worship idols in the world, anywhere in the world. You're not allowed to worship idols. Jewish, non-Jewish, you're not allowed to worship idols. If a person worships idols and gets other people to worship idols, he's a seducer. He's guilty of the death penalty. If you have the majority of the city goes after his influence, and the majority of the city is doing idol worship, the city has to be destroyed, completely destroyed, and no one's allowed to live there ever again or have benefit from anything that's left over. And that's what the Torah says, you shall eradicate the evil from your midst. That's referring to idol worship. And Chassidus says that refers to you, to your heart, to the left side of your heart, to get the idol worship which is Yetzer Hara, out of the left side of your heart. And so when a person is doing this and he's succeeding, and he's driving the evil out of the left side of his heart, page 151, as it says, you shall eradicate the evil from your midst. But the evil did not yet become a player on the winning team. The evil did not say, I want to be on the winning team too. Let me have a chance to carry the ball. I'll go for the touchdown. No, he's not there yet. He did not turn the evil of the Yetzer Hara into a Yetzer type. Didn't get there yet. In other words, like the pawn and the chessboard did not get to the very last square on the board and become a queen. It's almost there. He's one move away. Can't make that move though because he's in check. If he loses, makes that move, he loses the game. So there's the pawn ready to get to the end of the board, and the guy who is the owner, the player who's controlling this pawn, he can't make that last move. The pawn should become a queen. So there he is spiritually, almost he's on the verge, on the very border of being a complete tzaddik. But he's not there yet. Because the complete tzaddik, the evil is converted and becomes good. So therefore he's called, page 151, 3 lines from the bottom, tzaddik she'ena gamor, a tzaddik who is not the complete tzaddik. It's just that little smidgen left. And he's called tzaddik v'ra'aloi because that little smidgen is ra, is evil. So he's called tzaddik who has evil. And that's what it means on page 1 of the Tanya when it says from the Talmud and the Talmud of blessings, about blessings, it says one of the categories of souls is a righteous person who suffers. And we suggest that maybe that means that he has a lot of physical suffering, emotional suffering. And here the Tanya says, no, that's a person who, not negating it, but that's a person who did not yet become the complete tzaddik. And I was on the verge of telling you about Rabbi Zusha, who was the colleague of the Alter Rebbe. And he asked the Rebbe, what do you do about, how do you understand that a person suffers? You should bless Hashem for the suffering the same way he blesses Hashem for his blessings. Thanks Hashem. You should thank Hashem for the suffering the same way you thank him for the blessings. In other words, when you get a blessing, that you find your way to Machon Chan, you say, thank you Hashem for bringing me here. Thank you Hashem for bringing me here. We all feel that way. The teachers also feel that way. Yes, ma'am. Mrs. Yaffe also feels that way. We're all very loyal. But it says, not only you thank Hashem for the good things, you have to thank Hashem for the blessed things in the bad things in the same way. And he said to the Alter Rebbe, how do you do that? So he sent him to Reb Zusha to ask him this question. He came to Reb Zusha, and Reb Zusha said, what are you here for? He said, I'm here to learn. He says, well, I don't know why I sent you here. I don't have any bad things in my life. And he was living in abject poverty. Terrible, terrible. He said, I don't have any bad things in my life.
Wait, you should have to get it back.
What?
That basically saying that a person should think that he has any bad thing happen in his life.
Any bad thing that you think happens to you is only the good. There's deep good hidden in it, but it's hidden. There's deep good hidden in it, but it's hidden. And since it's hidden, you don't see it.
Right. Think that everything for the good.
Like hide and seek. Where is it?
Yeah.
Like the story of the king played hide and seek with his son, the prince, and the prince couldn't find the king. He was such a smart king, he could hide in such a way that the king couldn't find him. But the king wants his son to find him. And what does he do? Once the Rebbe cried when he told the story, and he said, what does he do when the prince gives up? He says, I can't find him. And he gives up. And the Rebbe wept. You have to say a blessing.
Thank you.